Hey there, everybody. Dave Valente for the Thursday Night Hockey Show. I get that it is Saturday night. I know it's Saturday. Uh, Reason why I didn't do a Thursday Night Hockey Show is it was my wife's birthday, so I'd rather spend time with her and make her happy, and delay the show a couple nights and entertain you when I've got plenty of time to do so. We've got plenty of stuff to talk about tonight. So let's take a look. And thanks to everybody joining me on Facebook, on Twitch, on Twitter, and over here. Hello, all y'all fine folks on uh, uh, TikTok. Hit the screen, give me some likes. Just helps boost the reach of the show and lets more people see it. But anyway, thanks for joining us tonight. Let's take a look at the day in hockey or the night in hockey as well. It's a 14 game schedule for going on tonight, and let's take a look. Uh, Two games have already happened. We had Anaheim and Buffalo. My Buffalo Sabres beat the Anaheim Ducks 6-3. Tampa Bay and Calgary. That game has gone final. Also a 6-3 victory for the Calgary Flames. That was a pretty tight game going up until the end of the game. I guess they got a couple of empty netters for the Flames. Just underway, the Minnesota Wild are in Sunrise, Florida, to take on the Panthers. And then the rest of the games take place later. We've got the Leafs and the Canadians. Today is Hockey Day in Canada. Happy Hockey Day in Canada to all those who celebrate. But the Maple Leafs are in Montreal to take on the Canadians. We'll have some news about the Montreal Canadiens, including their top goal scorer in a little bit. The Jets are in Ottawa to take on the Senators. The Red Wings and Flyers will be facing off in Detroit at 7 o'clock. The Sharks will be in Columbus to take on the Blue Jackets at 7 o'clock. At 7:30, the Hurricanes will be on Long Island to take on the Islanders. The Arizona Coyotes are in Dallas to take on the Dallas Stars. The Blackhawks will be taking on the Blues in St. Louis at 8 p.m. Also at 8 p.m., the Kings will be in Nashville taking on the Predators. 10 o'clock tonight, the Oilers will be taking on the Vancouver Canucks, the late game of the Hockey Day in Canada schedule. The Capitals will be on West Coast time at 10 p.m., taking on the Vegas Golden Knights in Vegas. And finally, the Avalanche will be up in Seattle, taking on the Kraken. So a busy night. 28 out of the 32 NHL teams are on the schedule. So go ahead and check out some of those games. It's going to be a good night of hockey. Of course, football's going on. I got the Chiefs and Jaguars going on the other side of me here. But thanks for joining me here on the Thursday Night Hockey Show tonight. Let's get rid of this. So it's been a busy week in hockey. Some really interesting stories, good celebrations, a little bit of controversy. So let's get into it. Let's take a look at the breaking news. All right, congratulations to Steven Stamkos, who got his 500th goal and scored a hat trick in the same game against the Vancouver Canucks the other night, a couple nights ago. Well earned accolades for Steven Stamkos, who's been a great scorer for a long time. Him and Alex Ovechkin are, and now I'm not sorry, Mitch Marner, but Austin Matthews, the last few players to have scored 60 goals in an NHL calendar year, or not calendar year, but a season. So, congrats to him. 500 goals, definitely first ballot Hall of Famer. A tremendous career, and he's still got a few years left. So, I don't think he's going to get to Alex Ovechkin numbers, but 600 goals is certainly attainable achievement for him. Let's see. Controversy happening in Philadelphia this week. So each NHL team, or a lot of NHL teams, are having what are called Pride Nights. So celebrating the LGBTQ community in their communities. I know Buffalo's been doing it for a while. Pittsburgh's been doing it for a while. Um, this week, Philadelphia had their Pride Night. The controversy that came from it was Ivan Provorov, the defenseman for the Flyers, who's been criticized not being, quote unquote, not being a team player, refused to take part in the pregame skate where the Flyers were wearing special uniforms that had rainbow numbers and things like that on it that were going to be auctioned after after the game for charities that benefited LGBTQ uh, hockey in the Philadelphia area, and they also had sticks that were wrapped in rainbow colored tape. Um, he refused to take part in the pregame skate. Now they wore their regular jerseys during the game, so he was fine with playing in the regular game. He was not benched for his actions, but it did cause quite a bit of commotion amongst the hockey community. Um, uh, for their part, the NHL and the Philadelphia, well, let's say Ivan Provorov indicated that he didn't want to take part because it was against his beliefs and his religion. So he didn't participate in the pregame skate. He did skate in the game. The Flyers and the NHL, for their part, have said that they're not going to let the night be ruined by the actions of one player, and that people are entitled to their beliefs. They wanted to celebrate the fact that the rest of the team did participate, and in a diverse workforce, you're going to have people with diverse opinions, and I part of me is like, that's kind of a jerk move by Provorov. Um, but if he was out there saying, screw gay people and they're awful people and holding actual bigoted views and throwing out epithets or something along those lines, it would be much more easy for me to say, okay, just suspend him, teach him a lesson for that. If it's just his beliefs and his views, uh, as ignorant as I think they are, there's no way really that you can punish him for that. Those are his beliefs. Let him believe what he believes. Let him be wrong. Um, there's no constitutional guarantee that people will be right all the time. So um, uh, I'm not happy about it, but that just reflects poorly on him, in my opinion. So anyway, off of that news, the controversial news of the week, let's talk about the Joseph brothers. For the third time in NHL history, brothers served a penalty at the same time in the same game. So the Joseph brothers, usually this would be the result of something like fighting, which has happened before. But the Joseph brothers got into coincidental minors on high sticking in a game last night. Uh, P.O. Pierre Oliver Joseph playing for Pittsburgh, defenseman, against Matthew Joseph, forward for the Ottawa Senators. Got coincidental high sticking majors, or not majors, but minor penalties, and served served penalties coincidentally. There was a great shot of their parents were in attendance. The dad was wearing an Ottawa Senators jersey. Mom was wearing a Pittsburgh Penguins jersey, and the dad is just kind of throwing his hands up like, "What? What did you guys do?" It was a great scene there in Pittsburgh. Like I said, it's the third time this has happened. Usually, when you think about coincidental penalties, it's probably something along the lines of roughing or fighting, which has happened before. In 1997, Keith and Wayne Primo brothers got into a fist fight in a game. Blu Buffalo versus Hartford when I'm sorry, when Wayne was with Buffalo and Keith was with Hartford, they got into a fight. Um, and then in 1992, Rich and Brent Sutter playing St. Louis versus uh, Chicago they actually got two different penalties against each other. One was rough. Yeah, there's two separate refereeing penalties. So yeah, it's happened before, but it's a rarity, and it was kind of funny to watch the parents' reactions to that last night. Let's see. Rumors that are starting to swirl, and it's starting to get to this guy Bruce Boudreau's has a very tenuous future of the Vancouver Canucks. There's lots of talk that tonight's game against Seattle might be, or not Seattle. Who are they playing? Edmonton. They're playing Edmonton tonight. Could be his last game behind the bench for the Vancouver Canucks. Yeah, kind of at this point last year when he took over with the Canucks, and got them rolling, but this season has not gone really well for the Vancouver Canucks. There's talk about blowing up the franchise and starting over. The talks about dealing Bo Horvat and JT Miller and other players. Um, but yeah, Bruce Boudreau was asked about that the other night after a game, and he's like, "You'd have to be stupid not to hear the things swirling around." He got a little bit of emotion about it, like people were asking, what's going through his mind. He goes, you come to the rink every day, you do your job, but you just the guy loves the sport of hockey, he loves to be around hockey, and you can tell that he knows that his days being involved in the Vancouver Canucks is coming to an end. Do I think it's the end of the line for Bruce Boudreau? I don't think so. I think at some point another team will take on Bruce Boudreau as a coach. He's got a track record of doing great things. I just think that the Vancouver Canucks are so absolutely mismanaged right now. Jim Rutherford's trying to do the same thing he did in Pittsburgh to Vancouver, and uh, he doesn't have a Sidney Crosby and an Evgeny Malkin and at least a decent goaltender, and a Chris Letang. He just doesn't have that right now. He's got some decent parts, but not a great team, and it's not going to be a quick turnaround for the Vancouver Canucks. But yeah, that's what's going on with Bruce Boudreau. Now we have a lengthy injury report. Let's get to that. Yeah, so several injuries came out in the last couple of days, the season-ending variety. So let's get to that. It looks like Max Pacioretty's season with the Carolina Hurricanes has ended after five, actually a little bit less than 5 games. Pacioretty was skating around the net towards with less than a minute to go the other night, collapsed, and it turns out he has retorn his Achilles tendon, same one that was repaired this season that caused him to miss the first half of this season. So he's going to be out for the rest of the season for the Carolina Hurricanes. Pacioretty was supposed to be kind of their big midseason acquisition because he didn't start the season. Came over in the trade during the summer with the Vegas Golden Knights as the Golden Knights were trying to shed some salary, and so he's going to be this big midseason addition for the Carolina Hurricanes. Now they're kind of back at square one. Carolina's not gonna hurt too much. I mean, they're still in first place. They got to first place in the, Metro division without, largely without Max Pacioretty, and they should be able to maintain, um, that level, but I expect them to be a little bit busier at, trade deadline, and we'll get into the trade deadline stuff here in a minute. The other big news, and let's just start laying it out for Montreal. I feel bad for Montreal. It's hard for me to say because as a Sabres fan, we play them all the time, and they've been a thorn, not quite as rivalrous as the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Boston Bruins, but still in the same division. But once you hear this kind of plethora of injuries, we talked last week about Brendan Gallagher being out long term. Um, so it came to knowledge today that Cole Caulfield is going to miss the rest of the season. He'd had a shoulder injury at the beginning of the season, and the Canadians had wanted to, see how if it can just kind of heal on its own. Um, it hasn't. I guess it's gotten markedly worse during the season. Not worse enough to stop him scoring because he was Montreal's second leading goal scorer, and or I'm sorry, he was their leading goal scorer, 26 goals, 10 ahead of Nick Suzuki at 16. So a significant amount of Montreal's goal scoring is gone now. Really, the only player left on Montreal after you hear this list is going to be Nick Suzuki. It's a sad thing for the Habs. They've lost a lot of man games this season from injury, and Cole Caulfield is the latest one. This is going to be the rest of the season with the shoulder injury. That he's going to have surgery in the next week. Um, let's see. Uri Slavkovsky, the number one overall pick this past draft, had been playing for Montreal. He's now out for at least 30 months, which is effectively the rest of the season for the Canadians with a lower body injury. But the good news for him is that it's probably not going to require surgery. So he'll be ready to go once the training camp start in September for the Habs. Um, Defenseman Jake Evans is out 8 to 10 weeks with a lower body injury for the Canadians. Yoel Armia and Jonathan Drouin are both out until at least the All Star break with upper body injuries. Sean Monahan, one of their big free agent acquisitions over the summer, is on long-term IR with a lower body injury. Um, that's just a tremendous amount of top players for the Montreal Canadiens. They do have some players left, but it's advantageous for the Canadians because they're in last place in the Atlantic Division. They could go for the Bedard sweepstakes now and have a pretty decent excuse that they're all their young players are injured. Um, but yeah, it's the problem for Montreal is they actually won too much at the beginning of the season, so they don't have actually a really horrible record. They're at least points wise, they got 41 points on the season, um, which is not that far out of like fifth place in the division. So um, they could get hot and still make a run. But if I was Montreal, I'd just say, you know what, let's get our chips into the table on this Bedard stuff, and maybe we can win the lottery and pick up a quality player. Then there's some good players, not named Bedard in this draft, but Bedard is miles ahead of whoever else is in the draft. So um, for the Toronto Maple Leafs, Nick Robertson is out for the season with after shoulder surgery. He's been out since December. They thought that they could probably rehab it to get him back into the lineups, but the Leafs are going to be without him. They'll be probably be on the active on the market to try and get a replacement. Sergei Bobrovsky is out for the Florida Panthers for the next 3 games with a lower body injury. So it's at least 3 games for Bobrovsky. That might carry them into the that might carry him into the All Star break. Um, Spencer Knight's also been injured, so they're going with a third string AHL starter. Alex Lyon, I believe, is the guy that's there. They're AHL backups with the team right now, but they think they can get Spencer Knight back in the lineup early this week. So we'll see what happens with the Panthers goaltending situation. Let's see. I was watching this and not surprised to hear this, but Cal Clutterbuck is out indefinitely for the Islanders after taking a puck to the hand, a nice slap shot right to the hand by the Buffalo Sabres. And he'll be out for a while with some kind of hand injury. Nothing was elaborated on, no timetable for his return. So the Bruins are going to be without Thomas Nosek for at least 4 weeks with a non displaced fracture in his foot. So the Bruins, they're still rolling. This isn't a devastating injury for them, but they'll probably be looking for a little bit of scoring help, and we'll highlight that next week when we talk about the uh, Atlantic Division's trade deadline. Vladimir Tarasenko could return soon. Speaking of the trade deadline, Vladimir Tarasenko should return early this week to St. Louis after a hand injury that has sidelined him for a few games. Um, they're still without guys like um, Ryan O'Reilly and um, Torrey Krug, the defenseman. So they're out long term for the Blues, and I'm sure they're hoping that they can get these guys back before the trade deadline, so they can move them along. Hopefully, Tristan Jarry just came back. If you remember, he was injured in the Winter Classic. Um, got through about a half a period. He looked awkward going down to block a shot, and skated off about a half a period into the Winter Classic, which Pittsburgh lost that game 2-1. But he was back last night. I think he's starting tonight for the Penguins as well. So welcome back, Tristan Jarry. Let's go to our crime and punishment series. All right, Montreal's Mike Matheson was fined $5,000 by the league for an interference call against Eric Stahl of the Florida Panthers. So 5,000. I think Eric Stahl was injured on that play, not long term, but a couple days on day to day on the IR for Eric Stahl. So that's why he got the fine. Uh, Florida Panthers coach Paul Maurice got a $25,000 fine for criticizing the officials following Florida dropping an overtime decision to the Toronto Maple Leafs on Tuesday. Um, Questioned some of the calls towards the end of the game, that the number of calls that Florida took versus Toronto that got Toronto back into the game, because Florida won that was I think had a couple different 2-goal leads in that game and lost in overtime. All right. So, other news in the NHL, the rest of the NHL All-Star teams have been announced. So we'll go through these teams and I'll give you a little refresher. So the Atlantic team that was announced by the league, the ones that were picked by the league, Tage Thompson out of Buffalo, Dylan Larkin out of Detroit, Matthew Kachuk out of Florida, Nick Suzuki out of Montreal, Brady Kachuk out of Ottawa, Steven Stamkos out of Tampa, Mitch Marner out of Toronto, and Linus Olmark out of Boston. Um, the voted in all stars. So each division would get two more skaters and one more goaltender for the All Star game. Those are Austin Matthews of the Toronto Maple Leaf, David Pastrnak of the Bruins, and Andre Vasilevsky of the Tampa Bay Lightning. So no real surprises here. Nobody really snubbed. I guess you can make the case for Rasmus Dahlin being snubbed, um, but when it comes to a popular vote, outvoting Boston and Toronto tends to be kind of a pain. Um, and as far as goaltending goes, yeah, Andre Vasilevsky is probably the second best goaltender in the division this season. So, not going to argue too much with those. The All Stars that were chosen out of the by the league out of the Metro divisions: Svechnikov out of California, Carolina, Johnny Gaudreau out of Columbus, which Hughes is that? Jack Hughes, sorry, out of New Jersey. Uh, Brock Nelson out of the Islanders, Jimmy Hayes out of the Philadelphia Flyers, Sidney Crosby out of Pittsburgh, Alex Ovechkin out of the Washington Capitals, and Igor Shesterkin, the goaltender, out of the New York Rangers. The three that were voted in were Ilya Sorokin, the goaltender of the Islanders, Artemi Panarin of the Rangers, and Adam Fox of the Rangers. I don't have too much of a problem with who was voted in. Um, Fox is a good defender, a good player. Um, yeah, maybe the problem I have with him is that there are other defenders in the league overall I think are better than him, but I don't have too much of a problem with who was voted in here. Plus, it being a popularity contest, it's not a surprise that all three players are from the New York metro area. Um, all right, let's take a look at who was named by the league to the Central All Stars. That was Clayton Keller out of Arizona, Jason Robertson out of Dallas, Kirill Kaprizov out of Minnesota, Vladimir Tarasenko. And look, I was thinking that they may replace him because of his injury, but if he's coming back for the All Star game, he'll probably still play, but he'll represent St. Louis. Seth Jones out of Chicago, Cale Makar out of Colorado, and Josh Morrissey out of Winnipeg, with the backstop being UC Soros out of Nashville. The voted in All Stars are Connor Hellebuck out of Winnipeg, Mikko Rantanen out of Colorado, and Nathan McKinnon out of Colorado. No real surprises here. Again, voting. The Avalanche just won the Stanley Cup, so they're going to have a ton of fans really focusing on them. Uh, McKinnon and Rantanen both have had injuries this season, and um, this is kind of more on a body of work than what they've done this season. So Connor Hellebuck has had a great bounce back season. I have no problem with him being the second goaltender for the Central Division. Let's go to the Pacific, named by the league: Troy Terry out of Anaheim, Nassim Kadri out of Calgary, Connor McDavid out of Edmonton, Kevin Fiala out of LA, Matty Beniers out of Seattle, Elias Pettersson out of Vancouver, Eric Carlson out of San Jose, and what is his first name? Thompson out of uh, the goaltender of the Vegas Golden Knights. And then voted in by the fans in the Pacific: Leon Draisaitl by the Edmonton Oilers, Skinner of the Edmonton Oilers, and Bo Horvat of the Vancouver Canucks. Uh, I don't know. This one I have the hardest time with. Um, Bo Horvat's a good player. I don't know that he is worthy of a all-star vote. Leon Draisaitl, absolutely worthy. Stuart Skinner, I don't know that he's the second best goaltender in in the Pacific Division. But again, it's a popularity contest. A lot of bandwagon fans on the Edmonton Oilers bandwagon. So uh, we'll. s- Uh, it's a fourth place team in the division right now. So I'm not impressed. You can't blame it on the feet of McDavid and Draisaitl. Um, it's just that Edmonton management has never really addressed the defensive side of the ice for the Edmonton Oilers. So, all right, let's talk about the trade deadline coming up. So it's coming up, I believe, March 5th. And I wanted to do kind of an in-depth look at each of the divisions and see what cap space they have, what their needs, whether they're going to be buyers or sellers or somewhere in between. And so let's take a look. For me, out of the Metro division, the buyers of the Metro division are going to be Carolina, New Jersey, and the New York Rangers and Washington. These are the teams I really feel solidly about their playoff positioning right now, and will be looking to add as we go towards the trade deadline. Um, Carolina has the most advantage right now because of the Pacioretty injury, putting him on long-term IR. They've got $8.6 million worth with which to play with in during the trade deadline. New Jersey, second best, they've got $2 million to play with. The Rangers have 1.8 million, which is kind of amazing, but I think they've got a couple players on that long-term IR that's helping them out. And then Washington is right up against the cap. There's not much room there for the room at the end of the caps. But bear in mind, there are some players out there that are getting towards the end of their contracts, um, or you may even be high priced at this point, but you can involve some cap mechanics to do it. And remember, these contracts are prorated. So, what is a $6 million contract at the beginning of the season goes down as you because they're counting it through the season. Every day during that season, they're taking a little bit of money off that. What's left that counts towards your salary cap. So, if you acquire a $6 million player 2/3 of the way through the season, you're only paying that. It's only going to count two million on the cap. There's other things that you can do to help reduce that. You can convince the team that you're trading with to retain some of the salary. So you can convince them to retain up to 50% of the salary, which makes that $2 million player uh, $1 million. And then you can also try and do a third team in the equation. So let's say um, Anaheim trades a player to wants to trade a player to Carolina. um, they can trade that player to Arizona. Anaheim retains half the salary. It goes to Arizona. Arizona then retains half of the remaining salary. So you're talking about a 2 million player then being a $500,000 cap hit to the final destination of Carolina. Now, of course, you have to convince the team to in their intermediate process to continue training that player. Um, usually they'll do a package of draft picks. I think the best example of that was when they traded David Savard from the Columbus Blue Jackets to the Tampa Bay Lightning. Just trading him straight to the Tampa Bay Lightning, even with retaining the salary, because Tampa was so far up against the cap, was not feasible for Columbus. So they traded Savard to Detroit. Tampa traded picks to and a player to uh, Columbus, and they traded a pick to Detroit in exchange for Savard coming to Tampa. They were able to wipe out most of his salary, and then in the offseason, they were able to sign him to a longer term contract. So there's ways to circumvent the cap, and so those numbers that you see right there, yes, they're 8 million. You think, well, you can't get, if there's for some reason Connor McDavid ever came available, Carolina couldn't trade for him because it's $8.6 million, and he's got a $10 million contract, $12 million contract. Not so much at this point in the season. They would be able to afford him rather comfortably, based on this point of the season. They wouldn't be able to afford what the Edmonton Oilers would trade for him, but that's what. that's how the cap works in this exercise. So Carolina's in a very good place to add another player as they go into the trade deadline. What does Carolina need? They need the replacement for Max Pacioretty. We talked about it when we talked about his injury. He was supposed to be their big mid-season replacement that they wouldn't really need to go into the trade market because all of a sudden this guy gets added to the roster and he's a top flight scorer. So now they're going to need to replace him. So they're going to need to acquire another scoring winger to help out the team as they get closer to the playoffs. Um, again, Carolina's not desperate. They've got a good team even without Max Pacioretty. They proved that at the beginning of the season. I think they're going to be just fine without him, but they expect them to be pretty busy as we go up towards the trade deadline. Um, and for those who are curious, the Kansas City is now up 10 on Jacksonville 27-17. Let's see. Um, but you may notice that right now the trade deadline has been very, very quiet. There haven't been any big trades. There's been a couple players flipped here and there, but really it's just kind of either minor league depth or emergency purposes for injuries, but nothing really high profile so far this season. And that's probably because of a couple things. Most of the teams are getting very close to the salary cap. Um, Carolina is one of the few teams that has like just plenty of salary cap that's in a top position in the league. But you see all these other teams that are 2 million, 1 million, less than a million in their cap, and that's going to be a hard thing to negotiate as we get closer to the trade deadline. Teams want to make those deals. Um, Also, the other thing that's kind of hindering some teams from really jumping in on the deep end of salary or of trades is the idea that the salary cap's probably not going to go up by a huge amount, even with inflation and all the stuff that's been going on in the economic world. Gary Bettman at the midseason winter meetings discussed that the cap would only go up like 1 million next season. So teams are not if they've been spending to the cap already, they're going to have to subtract some before they can move in any other players. They should pay attention to what Tampa's done because they've done cap wizardry for a long time. All right, so who's in between? These teams can go either way depending on how the next few weeks go. They're either in playoff positions or relatively close. Um, to those playoff positions. So the tweeners in the Metro Division to me are Pittsburgh, the New York Islanders, and the Philadelphia Flyers. Islanders of those three teams have the most advantage at this point as far as cap space goes. Um, so they've got 3.135 million in cap space. And again, remember when you're trading, you can always trade out a player that takes money out. So maybe an older veteran that is not contributing as much but has a higher price, you can always add them on a trade as a sweetener to manufacture more cap space. Pittsburgh is in a rough shot. They're only 83,000 away from the salary cap and not getting any younger. We'll see what they can do to improve their lot. They've been very inconsistent this season. They'll run off 8 wins in 9 games, and then they'll lose like 8 games. So um, they're currently in one of those playoff positions. I think the second wild card position at this point. Um, and they're just they're treading water at this point, and we'll see how the season goes for them. Whether they're going to able to whether they're going to get desperate and make a deal, or if they kind of hold on. But the window for them is closing with Sidney Crosby. They're none of the big players on Pittsburgh are getting any younger. Your Jeff Carters, your Sidney Crosbys, your Genny Malkins, your Chris Letang, who has been injured off and on this season. Um, the Islanders, they need some middle six scoring and at least some scoring forwards. Watching them play Buffalo the other night, there's only one direction they go, which is straight ahead, which is good, but there's nothing really creative with their offense. Either they're going to shove the puck down your throat, or you're just going to be able to hold them off and beat them. There's no in between for the Islanders. For Pittsburgh, they need for a team that has a great depth in the middle. The first two lines, it's second, third, and fourth line. They need center help, and again, $83,000 is not getting a lot of cap space to work with. For the Philadelphia Flyers, I've included them here. They've had a really good run of late. They're 7-3 in the last 10, but they're really just kind of on that barely cut line. Um, if Philadelphia right now, what Philadelphia needs to do is determine whether they want to be in this race or not. And if I was running the team, I would say no. Let's move off some players and get some assets for the draft so that we can begin the rebuild. Um, because there's a lot of long term injuries on Philadelphia, guys out for the season. Um, if they got into the playoffs by the skin of their teeth, I don't know that they make much. It would make much of a difference. There's this needs to happen and needs to happen sooner rather than later for Philadelphia for them to be able to move forward. Um, and finally, the loan seller, and this is another reason why the trade deadline has been very slow up to this point, is that the parity in the league, where you've got Philadelphia still kind of realistically in the playoff race, is keeping teams from trading. If there were more teams that were in the tank for Bedard race, um, then you would see more movement, I think. But we only have like one team per division right now, except for the Central, where you got two teams battling it out that are really effectively into that tank race. So Columbus does have a couple $1 million in cap space. So trading with them is going to be a little harder because they don't have unless you're picking out a Patrick Laine out of their team, they don't have a lot of cap space to take on salary, which was what you would want. But getting a high price veteran out of Columbus um, is probably what they're going to want to do. They're going to want to continue to stack assets. They need to determine who is part of the long term solution in Columbus, and then make those moves to solidify that. Whether it's dealing off some of these veteran players, um, or just getting more assets for the draft coming up. So it's going to have to be a combination of that for Columbus because for a team to be that close to the cap and be that bad, that's not a good look. So, and I know that they just dumped a ton of cash on Johnny Gaudreau in the offseason. And Columbus is a great place to live, but if you're not fielding a good hockey team, no one's going to come join Johnny Gaudreau, and eventually he'll get traded off as he gets frustrated. Let's see. Let's go to our next week. We're going to talk about the Atlantic Division, go through their cap situation, what their team needs are going to be, and let you know with that. But let's talk about our teams and players of the week. Yeah, so let's go into the team of the week in the Metro Division. I'm going with the New Jersey Devils, who are 7-1-2 in the last 10. They're 18-2-2 on the road, which is impressive. Um, uh, they did have a rough patch after they went on that long winning streak. They did have a rough patch. Carolina was able to catch them in the division and pass them, but they're able to maintain and creep up on Carolina and get close in that division race. Um, on their play in the last 10. They're a good team. That road record is amazing. Um, they're not great at home, but that road record is amazing. So, uh, kudos to the New Jersey Devils. The coldest team of the week. I got to watch them this week. I was telling you there's only one way with the Islanders. You're either going to stuff the puck down your throat, or you're just going to be able to stop them and get the win. So they're 2-5-3 in the last 10. They've dropped three in a row, and they're not in a really great position in their division to get into a very long cold funk. If this goes on, all the way to the All Star game, they could be in that cellar category very quickly. So um, let's go to the Atlantic Division. And no real surprise here. Team of the week in the Atlantic Division is Boston. They did finally lose regulation at home to Seattle, who was just on a banger of a road trip. and managed to do the first 7-0 road trip in NHL history. But Boston responded by winning 4 in a row, and the rich get richer with them. Now we did hear that Thomas Nosek is injured, uh, but they're still firing on all cylinders. There is talk that Boston might begin to rest Patrice Bergeron as the season goes along to take some of the miles off his body as we get closer to the playoffs. Again, they're in a marvelous position right now where they could entertain doing this, and even if they lose those games, not really impact where they're at in the NHL. So, um, just kind of keep an eye on that for the Boston Bruins. I'm not really saying that there's much of a cold team. If Buffalo had lost today, I think I would have put them in the cold team category because that would have been like um, 5 of the last 7 games that they lost. But they've won 2 in a row, beat the Islanders in overtime. They, of course, beat Anaheim today. I would have put them cold, especially for losing and blowing a 2-goal lead against the Chicago Blackhawks. Um, but they're treading right now. This I've said what they it's what they needed to do because they're on this 3-week stretch where they're playing 4 games each week. It's a very dense schedule. I think it was 17 games in 24 days. It's a very compacted schedule for the Sabres right here going up until the All-Star game. So get a few more wins out of the next few games. I'll feel a lot better about their second half chances. But yeah, they're just treading water just like everybody else, except for Boston in the division. And maybe you could make the case for Tampa as well. Coldest, let's go to the Central Division. Colorado is my top team in the Central Division. They've won 4 in a row, starting to show signs of light. They're starting to get players back in the lineup, and so yeah, Colorado. Look out the rest of the Central Division. They may be starting to wake up. Coldest team in that Central Division is Arizona. And I think this was the same thing as was last week. It's 1-9 in the last 10 games. The shine has gone off the new arena, and yeah, they debuted this weird Desert Knights jersey this week that looks kind of like a softball jersey. I'm not a big fan of it. Former host of the show, Travis Rednick, also is not a fan of it. He's a Arizona Coyotes fan and didn't like it. It doesn't fit to me. It just doesn't fit the Arizona motif. Again, the Kachina dog is perfect. That is that Southwest motif. That's perfect. There are some elements I liked of the uniform. There's a saguaro cactus outline on the shorts. That's kind of cool. I like that, but a lot of that jersey, I'm not a real fan of. All right, let's head to the Pacific Division. Seattle, like I said a moment ago, completed the first 7-0 road trip in NHL history. They're 8-2 in their last 10, and they moved into first place in the Pacific. Second year team. Now, take some of the shine off of because Las Vegas did this in their first season, but they took the lead from Las Vegas or from Vegas. So kudos to Seattle. Again, watching their expansion draft, wasn't expecting this team to be much in the first few seasons. They were able to make some moves in the offseason to bring in some quality players, and they're playing good hockey right now. They've had a couple bumps during this season, but they've really been playing well. And a 7-0 road trip, the first time in NHL history, and then an 8-2 of the last 10 shows you that they're rolling right now. So coldest team, we've actually mentioned them a little bit. Bruce Boudreau's Vancouver Canucks. They're 2-8 in the last 10. This franchise is a mess. The GM is going on holding news conferences talking about blowing up the team, and your coach is visibly shaken during interviews. It's not a good look for the Vegas or for the Vancouver Canucks. Um, hopefully, hopefully this team wins franchise wins a Stanley Cup for their fans at some point, but not before Buffalo because they're our expansion cousins. So. And then finally, let's talk about the NHL 3 stars of the week. That is Martin Jones of the Seattle Kraken, goaltender. Um, really, he had a kind of a good run when he was playing for uh, San Jose, then kind of bounced around the league, went to Philadelphia as a backup, just couldn't get his game back. But he's gotten it back in Seattle and went 3-0 this week, 1.67 goals against average, and a 933 save percentage. The second star was Lucas Raymond of the Detroit Red Wings, 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points in the last 3 games. And then finally, Nikita Kucherov of the Tampa Bay Lightning, 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points in 3 games. So those are the 3 stars this week. Let's go into our Buffalo Sabres beat. So this week, the theme that I want to kind of highlight for the Buffalo Sabres is you got to put in a full 60. Um, that's one of the criticisms I have of this team right now is that they take off. Today was a classic. They bust out to a 2-0 lead against Anaheim, um, and get into the second period. They almost make it 3-0. Lyubushkin put one off the post, and then almost immediately Trevor Zegras comes down and scores a great goal. Um, Very tough to watch. The rest of the period was pretty much Buffalo almost owning the puck, but 3 dumb plays, and it's a 3-3 game as we go into the third period. Now, fortunately for the Sabres, they did wake up and they played well in the third period, owned the puck, and took a 6-3 lead, winning the game 6-3. Um, but they've done this several times over the last few weeks where, especially teams where you think they should win. Another example would be the Chicago game. They're up 3-1 going into the third period, and they allow an early goal in the third period to make it 3-2, and Rasmus Dahlin loses his mind for and takes a 10-minute misconduct. Now it wasn't a manpower penalty, but it takes Rasmus Dahlin off the ice for 10 minutes. And then Chicago was able to tie it up at the last minute and then win it in overtime. Having When your team takes those periods off, um, even if you escape like you did today, um, it might create bad habits where your team can start thinking, "Oh, well, we can take a period off and we'll just be able to come back like we did against Anaheim." Um, you're also not showing respect to the team that you're playing. Yeah, Anaheim's had a bad season. Chicago's had a bad season, but take it seriously. Blow them out. Blow them out like you did Columbus. It doesn't cost you anything. Just uh, play hard for 60 and keep putting the pressure on teams because if you take your foot off the gas, it's very hard to put it back on. So that's what I want from the Sabres going on in the next few weeks as we move towards the All Star game. Just getting a full effort for full 60 and getting those points, stacking those points, keep getting closer and closer to the playoffs. Again, it's not just Florida that they're fighting against; they're also fighting against the wild card teams in the Metro division because right now both wild card teams are coming from the Metro because of I think Buffalo's got 49 points now, and I think Pittsburgh's at 51 or 52 points now. So now Buffalo does have games in hand, but keep stacking points. Don't hope that Pittsburgh's gonna lose games. Just keep playing your game, keep winning, keep stacking those points, and keep the pressure on those other teams. And eventually they'll falter, and you'll be able to take that playoff spot. So anyway, that's it for the week. Next week we're going to be talking, and this is going to be on Thursday. Next week we'll talk about the Atlantic Division, who are the buyers, sellers, and the tweeners in that Atlantic Division. Make sure that you stay tuned for that. We'll talk about the latest and greatest. Maybe there's a trade by the time we get to next week's show. But thanks for joining us on the Thursday Night Hockey Show on Saturday night. We'll talk to everyone next week.